Hi there, you're watching The Nation Update with me, Jessy Chahal. Thanks for being with me, of course, as we kickstart another brand new week towards mid and beyond here in September. Of course, many milestones ahead of us as we, or as a nation, roll out the National Immunization Program as well as the National Recovery Plan, all towards one goal to fight and come out of this pandemic shining. Now, to discuss matters related to this and beyond on the program today, I'm joined by two special guests. Of course, first, Dr. Owi San, political analyst on what's been happening at the Parliament, as well as I speak to Peter NICOLL, crisis communications analyst on AUKUS, which is a trilateral security pact between Australia, the UK, and the United States. But let's move on to what's happened at the Parliament earlier today. Communications and Multimedia Minister Tan Sri Annuar Musa had this to say, and he says, better awareness among Malaysians has led to fewer incidents of fake news on social media about COVID-19 and vaccines. Another very important aspect of how we battle through this COVID-19 pandemic, of course, in terms of handling unverified news that can spread like wildfire on social media. Now, the minister adds, overall, the spread of fake news on social media has lessened compared to when the vaccination program was initially launched. He says rapid response teams have been set up to tackle fake news on social media platforms that have dealt with a lower number of cases up to aim at providing accurate information to dispel fake news. This had seen some 186 million page views and some 9.83 million hits. Those are pretty good numbers. Now, let's keep in mind that the MCMC, or the Malaysian Communications and Multimedia Commission, has carried out about 83 advocacy campaigns through the Malaysia ICT Volunteer Program last year. And for this year, so far, that number is at 25. Now, as we move on, a bipartisan effort among members of parliaments led by Datuk Sri Azlina Othman said has made 3 recommendations to better protect the interests of children nationwide. Some of these recommendations: to grant citizenship to babies born overseas, to Malaysian women married to foreigners. This includes invoking the initial interpretation that citizenship is only granted to a baby whose quote-unquote father is Malaysian. The second recommendation I need to, of course, underline and underscore here is to request the government to review allocations to the Sexual, Women and Child Investigations Division D11 for additional positions. And the third recommendation, the establishment of a Children's Commission Act to ensure focused, comprehensive and efficient defense of children. All salient and important points in terms of how we move forward in addressing many of the laws here in the country, as well as social issues. As we move on to the Education Minister, Datuk Radzi Jidin, he says the Education Ministry will be coming up with a new circular on teacher transfer soon. The ministry is drafting a plan on how to implement such transfers in a more holistic manner. Also, the minister said that they will be issuing a new circular guideline in due time to clarify any issue and replace the previous circular, which was issued back in 1975. The transfer applications would be considered based on the needs of respective schools as well. Now, on teaching points or options for teachers, the minister said that the ministry is also drafting new guidelines which will allow graduate teachers to opt for an additional subject based on their teaching experience. Let's bring in now Dr. Owi San, Senior Fellow from the Singapore Institute of International Affairs, to take us through some of the points of discussion that's been happening at the Parliament. Hi, Doctor. Thanks for weighing in and joining me today. Of course, let's begin with this. According to His Majesty the Yang di-Pertuan Agong, a bipartisan approach of governance, this has the potential of shaping new political landscape. How so? What's your view on this?
Well, of course, over the last 1.5 years, we have seen a lot of political upheavals. I think His Majesty the King was indeed very anxious to see that politics would take a back seat to, for example, the efforts to combat the pandemic as well as to revive the economy. And under our constitutional convention, indeed, the king could advise not only the government but also the opposition as to what they should or should not do. But of course, this would be just advice. Ultimately, it's still up to the government, and at least here we have the major opposition to decide what they would like to do. And apparently, they decided to enter into a so-called confidence and supply agreement in the form of an MOU. And I think the most important thing about this sort of MOU is that number one, both sides would need to have a level of trust on each other. The opposition, we have to trust that the government would indeed implement or at least bring to parliament for a vote those reform proposals. The government, on the other hand, we have to trust that Pakatan Harapan in this case would indeed vote or abstain from vote when it comes to, for example, confidence motions, which could decide the rise and fall of the government. Now, frankly speaking, we are now still at a very, very early stage as to whether this sort of confidence and supply agreement would indeed hold in the longer term. But I have seen, of course, from what you showed just now in parliaments, the members of parliaments, they are engaging in very substantive debates on very important issues such as child protections and so on. Hopefully, this sort of spirit will prevail for the longer period to come.
Right. So, Doctor, most of the economic sectors we know now are opening up gradually. We're seeing a lot of movement there, and sort of businesses coming back to life as well. With all of this in place, what are some of your thoughts here when you talk about politics and policies, and when we look back at how we can regain some normalcy in a new climate?
Well, normalcy is indeed the keyword here. We have been prevented from, going outside substantially for the longest period of time, and a lot of people's livelihood are, of course, at stake here because while they are able to protect themselves more efficiently against the virus by staying at home, by not going out, especially those who are so-called day wage earners. They are getting paid every single day, as well as those in the service industries who would need to serve their customers and so on. Their businesses indeed are very much impacted. So I think the priority for the parliament nowadays, as we go into this session and perhaps the next, number one, of course, the budget is at the back of everybody's mind. Hopefully, the government not only could dole out more cash, but also more policies which would facilitate people's return to a normal livelihood. And for the longer term, have the next Malaysia plan, which is a 5 years plan, and hopefully that could further lift us out of this really pandemic-induced recession.
Doctor, before I let you go, recently a trilateral security pact between Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States was announced. In fact, just about 5 days ago. The acronym is AUKUS. We'll be speaking to Pete NICOLL in just a short while about this. But what are your thoughts on this pact and how it's playing out?
Well, I think I have two main points here. Number one, it's very important to realize AUKUS is not about Australia having nuclear weapons. I think a lot of people will have that misunderstanding. It's about the US and UK transferring technology for building submarines to Australia. And this sort of technology involves nuclear powered engines. So Australian submarines, or at least the newer ones, they will have longer ranges. They could patrol not only Australian waters, but also, for example, South China Sea. Now, it concerns us a little bit. Number one, because we are part of Southeast Asia. And number two, Australia, in a sense, is our treaty ally. Please don't forget we have this arrangement called the five power defense arrangements, whereby UK, Australia, New Zealand, Malaysia, as well as Singapore, we should indeed help each other if any one of us is attacked. And therefore, Australia's higher capability of projecting their naval forces would indeed help defend us as well, just in case we are facing any sort of invasion. Yeah.
That's right. Thank you very much, Doctor. We're short on time. This round will speak to you very soon again. Of course,
Yeah.
that was Dr. Owi Sun, Senior Fellow from the Singapore Institute of International Affairs, weighing in a little bit on what happened in Parliament and, of course, the recently announced AUKUS. Well, what is AUKUS? It is a trilateral security pact between Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States. It was just announced on September 15th this year. Now, under this pact, the United States and the UK agreed to help Australia to develop and deploy nuclear powered submarines, adding to the Western military presence in the Pacific region. Now, although this joint announcement by the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison, the British Prime Minister, as well as the US President, did not mention any other country name or any other country by name, the anonymous White House sources have alleged that it is designed to counter the influence of the People's Republic of China in the Indo-Pacific region. Now, of course, this is a historic security pact in Asia Pacific. They say once again that perhaps it is an effort to counter China. I'd like to bring in Peter NICOLL, of course, our crisis communications analyst, who comes in to weigh in on important issues such as this. Pete, good to see you again. This AUKUS pack, they say, will also cover AI and other technologies. This is one of the country's biggest defense partnerships that has happened in decades as well, according to Analyst. Pete, what do Malaysians need to know about this?
Hi, Jessy. Thanks for having me on again. What Malaysians probably need to appreciate is that this is a very fluid and serious development, particularly in light of the ongoing tensions in the South China Sea that can affect us. And as you mentioned earlier, AUKUS is the new security partnership in Asia Pacific region, which will see the US and UK provide Australia with the technology and capability to deploy nuclear-powered submarines, as well as the potential acquisition of cruise missiles. And Australia this morning have already announced that they are going to be purchasing Tomahawk cruise missiles, which can be surface or submarine launched. So that's already moving ahead. This new alliance of such replaces and cancels an order already in place for France to build 12 conventional submarines. And as such is a major paradigm shift in Australian defence policy. So this major geopolitical shift, which has been driven really by one thing, and that is this announcement fits in obviously with the growing participation again of the world's biggest democracies to deter China from using its power. And France, a major ally and powerhouse in Asia, appears now to have considered itself deliberately excluded from this.
They feel that they've been stabbed in the back, Pete. Why is France not happy? What do we need to know about this part of the story?
Australia's decision to cancel the multi-billion-dollar order for French submarines in favour of US and UK technology, as you say, has sparked a diplomatic row of unprecedented proportions between long-time Western allies. The French have withdrawn ambassadors to the US and Australia with its complaint that a previously signed contract for the supply of the 12 conventional submarines from France to Australia has now been cancelled. But we're looking at what appears to be something that is more deeper than this, than just deeper than the commercial disturbance. Probably where France considers that it's a strategic planning as agreed between all the partners has now been damaged beyond repair, and the French now feel, in fact, betrayed by its allies. And a very important point, Jessy, is that France is the US's oldest ally, and it's never before recalled its ambassador. And the fact that for the first time in the history of relations between the two countries that France is recalling its ambassador shows the magnitude of the crisis that exists now between the two countries.
Okay, a statement was made recently by Datuk Saifuddin. He says, which mentions in this statement of his the escalation of arms race within the region, and he hopes for some clarification from Australia. As far as I'm aware, the Australian Prime Minister has contacted our Prime Minister to explain Australia's position in all of this. What do you know?
Yeah, there's credibility to that statement in terms of the arms race, particularly if the Australians do decide to ballistic nuclear capability submarines. And that would then breach the non-proliferation treatment. So there is a possibility there for this arms race to escalate. The pact itself shows Australia is very much aligning itself with the US and the UK, but also signals a vote of confidence in Australia by those nations, which is looking, to play a more active role in Asian security.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, Pete, before I let you go too, with not much left time on the clock, how do you see all of this playing out? AUKUS, Malaysia's position, and what's happening within the region as well?
I think it's credible to expect a fairly hot reaction from Beijing about all of this. It does change the balance of power in the region. If China does face a security situation in the South China Sea or Taiwan Strait, it will affect the military preparedness for that response. So it does change the power sort of equilibrium that we currently have in the region. The recent statement also by New Zealand banning any nuclear submarines in its waters is also intelligence sharing agreement between the US, UK, Canada, and Australia, and that rift would certainly be something that China will most definitely try and exploit.
That's right. Things that we will await and, of course, chase for developments as well, and share that right here on Bernama TV. Thank you, Pete, for weighing in. Do take care and stay safe. We'll speak to Pete again, of course, in the near future. Now let's move on to something from the Health Minister, Khairy Jamaluddin. He says the ministry will announce the list of existing vaccination centres or PPVs that will accommodate walk-ins for teenagers aged between 12 and 17. Now, teenagers going for vaccination must also fill up a consent form and must be accompanied by a parent or a guardian. And of course, they too must sign the consent form in front of the doctor at the vaccination center. So these SOPs have already been put in place. Teens can either wait for their appointment dates from schools that will serve as PPVs or walk into existing PPVs as well. There is a target of inoculating about 3.2 million teenagers nationwide. So this is also another step by the Health Ministry to roll out vaccination to ensure most, if not all, Malaysians are inoculated already. As of September 16th, 85,000 teenagers have already been vaccinated with no serious side effects. That's good news. Now, meanwhile, according to the Health Minister's Special Officer, Sylvie Ramasamy, she says education institutions that want to be part of the COVID-19 vaccination program for teenagers must first register. Schools and other educational institutions will also need to register on the Vaccine Anakku portal. That site or that URL is vaccineanakku.herokuapp.com. So you might want to look that up for more information. Vaccination appointments will be given to students registered by their educational institutions, and those with, of course, MySejahtera accounts will also be able to see their appointments there. So, of course, get your MySejahtera app if you haven't already to obtain digital vaccination certificates for teens. Now, let's not forget parents and guardians also need to have their MySejahtera. You can also list your children down as dependents within the app as well. From that, let's move on to something from the COVID-19 or about the COVID-19 vaccine supply. The special committee is saying that they will ensure access to vaccine. A total of 18,000 individuals or 18 million individuals or 78.8% of the adult population here in the country have been fully vaccinated as of Sunday. 93% of that or 22 million individuals of the adult population have received at least one dose of the vaccine. So once again, we've come a long way. Now, the Prime Minister has this to say. From October, Malaysia will be offering third doses to vulnerable groups, including healthcare frontliners and the elderly living with comorbidities to help increase their immunity against COVID-19. We're still very much in the thick of this pandemic, still fighting as much as we can, but we need to do our part and to, of course, get vaccinated so that we are all safe together. Now, the administration of booster shots will begin once the COVID-19 mass immunization covers 80% of the adult population in the country. So not too much of a mile to go there from 78.8% up to 80%. That milestone is coming up quite soon. Now, the Prime Minister has also added that a panel of healthcare and medical experts are currently developing guidelines on the booster shot implementation program. I know I've been also tracking and trying to mirror what's been happening on social media. I see a lot of people talking about this, coming up with concerns as well. If you've got your first 2 doses and you are safe, then perhaps you will consider the booster shots as well. Now, only 1.8% of the adult population in the country here remain fully vaccinated before the country achieves its target 80% of adult population vaccinated under the National Immunization Program. So the Science, Technology and Innovation Minister, he said 78.2% of the adult population here are fully vaccinated, and the current focus is on states to reach at least 60% of their adult population to be fully vaccinated by the end of September. So this target is expected to be achieved in just the next few days, depending on the performance of the CITF, which is the COVID-19 Immunization Task Force. I spoke about My Sejahtera a bit earlier. The My Sejahtera team say they have resolved over 500,000 complaints of digital vaccination certificates that were not being displayed on the app within a week upon vaccination. So the health minister says they took note of these complaints regarding the problem, and they continue to ensure that the app updates vaccine recipients' information from time to time. Do understand that this database is huge, and they're trying to do as much as possible from what we've been told or we understand. Here's a snapshot of what's happening internationally. The US top infectious disease doctor says that data needed to determine whether Americans should get booster shots of the Moderna Incorporated and Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccines is just weeks away. Now, the health regulators there say that so far they have only just begun to consider a third dose of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. And scientists at the Nanyang Technological University is tackling food waste by turning discarded durian husks into antibacterial gel bandages. Check this out. The process extracts cellulose powder from the fruit's husk after they are sliced and freeze dried, then mixed with glycerol, which becomes soft hydrogel that is then cut into bandage strips. With the kind of consumption that we have of durian, both here in Malaysia and Singapore, this seems like a viable move, a viable product moving forward. And in Barcelona, according to their urban police, 10,000 people protested against an expansion of Barcelona airport just yesterday. The protest at the airport comes despite a decision by the Spanish government this week to shelve the project for another 5 years. So this demonstration gathered a number of environmental and social organizations alongside neighborhood associations, all marching under the slogan, "No expansions. We fight for climate, health, and life." And as I see it as well, more people are really gaining more awareness and having a bigger need or desire to stand up for these things. That includes climate, a healthier living, healthier well-being, and healthier quality of life as well. From there, I'll take you to France. France has cancelled a meeting between Armed Forces Minister Florence Parly and her British counterpart planned this week after Australia scrapped a submarine order with Paris in favor of a deal with Washington and London. Now, this multi-million-dollar submarine contract, which is now off the table, was struck back in 2016. This has triggered a diplomatic crisis, with Paris recalling its ambassadors from Washington and Canberra. Now, France claims to not have been consulted by any of its allies, while Australia says it has made clear to Paris regarding concerns over the contract. And in Afghanistan, at least 2 civilians were killed in a bomb attack targeting a Taliban vehicle in Afghanistan's eastern city of Jalalabad just yesterday. And eyewitnesses have also stepped forward to say at least 5 people, including some Taliban members, were injured in this attack. Of course, so far there has been no claim of any responsibility of this attack made by pro-Daesh or ISIS militancy. And of course, as usual, I'd like to take you to Twitter to tell you what's happening there. If you'd like to share any of your views or your opinions or any topics you think we should be addressing right here on the Nation Update, do leave me a note. I can be found at Jessy Chahal on Twitter. Now, in Palestine, people on Twitter have been expressing their thoughts on freeing Palestine from Israel as well. And Malaysians have been tweeting regarding the importance of adhering to SOPs, especially in areas that are undergoing relaxed restrictions. I'm sure you agree, traffic is back and people are everywhere. So while we are out and about, let's still, of course, always still remember our SOPs, and we're all really now not out of danger yet. If you recall, the health minister also earlier this morning said that none of us, whoever of us who are fully vaccinated, still have that danger of being infected, and we can still spread it to others. And finally, Chelsea fans and supporters are head over heels tweeting regards Thiago Silva's excellent performance in the EPL last night. Well, that's it from me right here, taking you through the nation update. Thank you for being with me. And of course, if you'd like to share any of your other thoughts, leave us a message. We can be found on YouTube, on Facebook, even on Instagram. Till tomorrow, same time, same place. Take care and stay safe. Bye bye.